and now we have Julie Cameron, who is Head of Programs at the Mental Health Foundation of Scotland.
Okay. Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm going to give just a very brief overview of just some of the evidence around some of what we're talking about today, what influences how people feel, some of the factors that we might not have considered before. So I'm just going to take us through that. So before I do that, I thought it might be helpful just to give you a bit of an overview as to who the Mental Health Foundation are. So we're a prevention charity. This is our vision in terms of a world with good mental health for all. And essentially, our mission is to help people understand, protect, and sustain their mental health. How do we do this? Well, we do this through being a research organisation or a research-informed organisation. So we gather research, we conduct research, and we try to get that out there as much as we can to let people know just some of the evidence that's sitting underneath some of the big themes of our society at the minute, if you like. We work with people who have direct lived experience of whatever topic or experience that we're looking at, and we try and ensure that their voice is amplified in whatever that we do. And we always have a focus on prevention, so we don't provide services as such, but what we try and do is we try and work about that kind of level up from direct services that may be a bit more reactive when people already have a mental health problem, to saying how can we stop this happening in the first place, or for those who do have a mental health problem, how can we ensure that your quality of life with that is as good as it possibly can be. So essentially that's what we do. And I guess how we do that is partly through the development of research programs, the implementation to say, does this model work? Let's test it, let's see whether we can explore that. And one of the other things that we do is campaigns, and I guess that's why this is such a timely event. So Petra touched on earlier, we have our Mental Health Awareness Week. We run this every year rather, and this year it's on body image. And I guess one of the reasons that it's on body image is that previously, when we've done some of these Mental Health Awareness Weeks, body image has been a theme that's come up in one way or another. So last year we did stress, that was what the theme of the week was. And it came up a lot about how people feel about their bodies was a trigger for stress in many instances. So that's running in a couple of weeks. And as Petra says, what we're really keen to do is make sure that some of the learning from this feeds into that. And some other things that we'll be able to find on that week is we will launch a report, and we'll also be launching the findings of a poll that we commissioned that was undertaken in Scotland with young people in Scotland and with adults too. And I guess just to say, the focus today is on young people, but certainly the focus of our report is how people's feelings and thoughts about their body changes over the life course throughout all ages rather than just young people. So why is body image important? I guess the first thing to say is that it's important because young people are telling us that it's important. So this 16 to 25-year-olds identified as it being, that was a YMCA report called The World of Good. And they explored with young people what they thought were some of the big issues that young people were experiencing. So number one for young people was lack of employment opportunities. Number two was about for those young people who feel as though they're being failed by the education system. And number three came out as how people feel about their bodies and their view about their body image. So it's right up there. The British Social Attitude Study found that about 1 in 20 men and 1 in 10 women reported being dissatisfied with their appearance. And we know that as a society we place a great deal of importance on our appearance, and quite often appearance is linked to capability. So again, that British, that BSA study, what that found was that for a high, I think, wait, now check, that was about, nearly half of adults said that actually your appearance will impact on how well you do in life, how much you succeed. So there's a really close alignment between how people feel about their bodies and their sense of achievement in life. So we have to explore that. Why is it important? Well, we know that it affects our mental health and well-being. And it's important to say that having concerns about your body image isn't a mental health problem in and of itself. It's quite a natural point of life to explore how you feel about your body, sometimes feeling good about it, sometimes less so. But actually, it can be a risk factor for more significant mental health problems, and that's a real concern. So we know that it has been, through research, that it's been aligned to low self-esteem. We know that it can be aligned to symptoms of anxiety and depression. And what's really interesting about this is because of the way that often research studies are done, which is really about exploring people's attitudes at a certain point in time, it can be difficult at times to say, Is it about how people feel about their bodies that leads them to being depressed or feeling anxious, or actually was it because they were starting to get increasingly feeling low and feeling depressed that actually they started feeling low about how they feel about their body? And sometimes that relationship can be complex. But certainly some of the longitudinal studies, that essentially what that means is that you follow the same group of young people over a period of time, they seem to be saying that that relationship is, if you have high levels of body dissatisfaction, it increases your likelihood of depression or anxiety later on in life. So some really interesting stuff. And clearly we know that there is an alignment between how people feel about their bodies and disordered eating and eating disorders, to the point where that's also part of the diagnostic criteria for some eating disorders. So what affects how people feel about their bodies? Well, we know that it's really, really individual and can be really personal. So the experiences that you have, the environment that you live in, all of this feeds into how you feel about your body. And that includes media, how they present different images, what your family and friends say, pressure perhaps that you may feel around peers, all of these different things. So we know that relationships are really important. We know that how family and friends talk about both their own bodies but also other people and appearance in general, if they place a great deal of weight on the value of people's appearance rather than other qualities that a person might have. All of these things really, really matter. We know that this, within the society that we live in at the minute, there's a very clear idealised body type, and that for women can quite often be very, very thin and very, very slim, usually with extraordinarily large breasts, I have to say, and big bums and all the Kim Kardashian look. And for men it can be now a kind of very physical, athletic look. So we know that there's these ideal body types, and what can happen is that when young people feel, or any age of person feels that actually I'm not meeting that, nor will I ever likely to meet that, you can start to feel a sense of shame about your own body and start to relate that to the capabilities that you feel that you have as a person. And that can be a dangerous place to be. So we know that all these things, we know that social media has a real part to play within this. And I guess when I was growing up and in years gone by, the kind of idealised body images often came from kind of the catwalk, the media, magazines, but you could get some distance from it at points. These days, young people can't tend to get that distance. They bring that with them through their phone, so they've got it at night, they've got it at all hours during the day. So there's stuff going on there. And I think it's also really important for us in this room just to think about some of the other elements that impact on how we feel about our bodies that maybe don't get as much attention. But actually, it's really important to think through that there's key transitional points in a person's life that makes them feel differently about their body. For young people, that can be puberty. For older adults, that can be, for women, it can be if you have a baby. It can be going through the menopause. For men, it can be losing your hair. It can be when your body starts to change, or when the capabilities, as you age, when the capabilities that you once had start to feel as though you're not as able to do stuff you once did. And as part of that, it's also really important to remember those young people who have a chronic illness. That also seems to have a really strong effect on how people feel about their bodies, particularly if that's something that's developed in teenage years and over the years, so things that they once been able to do that their bodies are no longer capable of doing. So all of these factors are really important to bear in mind. And I've put a question mark over this idea of protected characteristics, and protected characteristics essentially mean age, gender, sexuality, these different things, disability. And there's really not good research on how that impacts on people's body image. But of the research that we do have, it's quite interesting what it starts to say. So there's been very small amount of studies that have explored issues around ethnicity. How does ethnicity affect how people feel about their body? And actually one of the more recent ones showed that black British girls have more positive view about their body than white British girls. Likely looking at issues around sexuality, some studies start to say that potentially it looks as though young gay men have higher levels of body dissatisfaction than heterosexual men. So we have to start unpicking these issues. For lesbian women, it's much less clear picture. I think there's been maybe just one study that showed that they may have higher levels of body satisfaction than heterosexual women, but other studies have shown that actually it's just the same. But what we do know is that these factors matter. They certainly matter at an individual level, so it's worth bearing all that in mind. So what supports good body image? We know that it's really important about how our parents relate to us and relate to in the language that they use. So if parents are able to kind of model, if you like, positive body image, then that can have a real positive impact on that child. And that means things like praising children on different qualities, not associating everything with how they look, making sure that an act of kindness doesn't go unnoticed, or various different things that they may do, and showing that as an adult that we really value people of different shapes and sizes, and vocalising that around our children. So some of these are really important. And some other things that parents can do is around supporting children to get that balance online between, yes, this is an opportunity for you to be independent, but actually you also need to be safe within that, and helping young people navigate that. So there's certainly things that parents can do. We know that having a strong friendship group can be really important to how you feel about your body. Unfortunately, it can also have a really negative impact. We know that young people experience bullying, and unfortunately some studies have shown that nearly up to half of young people between 11 and 16 would identify as experience bullying. And quite often that's about people's appearance. Children can be cruel, and they can pick on things that make people look different. And actually it's about, as a society and as young people, how can we start to foster those really positive relationships that make us feel good about ourselves? Because all of that has a really protective layer, if you like, for how you feel about yourself and how you feel about others. Being mindful about our language, we've got a role to play with this too as individuals. We need to think about what we present and how we're using and how we're talking about people. So if we're always dissing folk for particular physical attributes, we need to check and stop ourselves for doing that and thinking about, what am I saying this? What does that say about how I feel about myself, let alone that other person? And stopping and checking yourself. We also know that there are things that social media sites can do. So some of the things that have come out from young people has been the opportunity to hide followers, folk that are just dissing you all the time. If you've got a really clear ability to just hide that, then that's good. You shouldn't have to be seeing that day in, day out just because you want to be on now following your pals. You should be able to just block people really, really easily. So there's things that can be done. And essentially we also know that schools get a place to play, as is educational establishments. And that's about learning about body confidence. Again, school mirroring that this is how we value people of all shapes and sizes and capabilities, and making sure that there's a real ethos that goes through schools around that. And certainly there are also very particular things that schools can do around helping young people develop media literacy and critical thinking around the media, so that young people can say, I know that's not real, and actually I know that that's trying to manipulate me, and I've got a chance to talk about that, and I've got a chance to understand that. These are quite complex things, but we can help young people navigate this. So there's things that can be done, and the report that we are going to be launching on the 13th of May will summarise all of this, and we'll also be able to give some very new statistics on a poll that we've recently published. So do get your hands on that when it comes out. And I think that's me. So back to our brainstorming session 2. So